From ABC, this is World News Tonight with Peter Jennings. Reporting tonight from Iraq.
Good evening from Baghdad, where once again the Iraqi leadership is trying to cast the Bush administration as the bully. The Iraqi foreign minister said today that a marine amphibious exercise in Saudi Arabia next week, not far from Kuwait, was provocation and proof that the Bush administration is preparing to go to war, which has had no apparent effect on this capital city. 3 months after the Gulf crisis began, this capital does not look or feel as if it is suffering from the threats of war or the economic sanctions. We'll have that story from Baghdad later in the broadcast. But we'll begin with Ted Koppel, who's in Washington.
If the focus yesterday was on the U.S. Congress and whether it should debate the merits of going to war in the Persian Gulf, the focus today shifted to the international forum. National Security Correspondent John McWethy reports that the Bush administration is ready to crank up the pressure on Saddam Hussein by going to the UN Security Council for one more resolution that would give President Bush a green light for military action against Iraq.
Sensing that a victory in the UN Security Council may be within reach, Secretary Baker and President Bush have decided to go for broke. In order to get the Security Council to pass a resolution authorizing use of force in the Gulf, Baker needs at least 9 yes votes. The State Department announced this afternoon that Baker is now adding a backbreaking set of meetings in Europe during the next few days, trying to line up those votes. He collected 1 vote yesterday when he traveled all the way to Bermuda to meet with the Foreign Minister of Canada. This weekend in Geneva and Paris, the Secretary will be meeting with the foreign ministers of 8 other countries on the Security Council. The great fear of many countries is that the U.S. would interpret a resolution authorizing use of force as a blank check to attack Saddam Hussein. Baker, who puts great emphasis on personal diplomacy, is trying to reassure each country that the U.S. will not abuse the UN authority. U.S. officials say if all goes according to plan, Baker will call for a Security Council vote late this month. He is asking the foreign ministers of the countries represented on the council to come to New York to cast their nation's vote. If Baker gets the Security Council to authorize use of force, it will give President Bush a powerful new way to convince Saddam Hussein to back down. It will also provide the president with a crucial tool for dealing with the U.S. Congress. He can argue that if the United Nations is willing to support use of force in the Gulf, then surely the U.S. Congress will do so as well. John McWethy, ABC News, the State Department.
The order of business at the White House today was to make sure that Congress doesn't move too fast, that it waits for the UN to act first. And as ABC's Britt Hume reports, whatever steam was left in the congressional move to debate the Gulf crisis right away seems to have evaporated under pressure from Mr. Bush.
The president was trying today to convince the leaders of Congress his Persian Gulf policy has not changed without making his massive new troop buildup seem nothing more than a bluff. After a nearly 2-hour meeting, Senate Armed Services Chairman Nunn still thought the new buildup was a policy shift, but didn't want to talk about it. An aide said Nunn was also sore he hadn't been consulted in advance. But the top Democratic leaders seemed convinced, or at least prepared to give Mr. Bush the benefit of the doubt.
The president's assertion is that this additional buildup does not reflect a decision to use offensive force, but to have the capability for such a decision.
Foley said that was okay, but both leaders said a decision to actually use force would require congressional authorization in advance.
We made that view very clear. The president did not indicate a commitment either to do that or a refusal to do that.
Secretary of State Baker told reporters the president would continue to consult Congress, but couldn't guarantee he wouldn't act on his own.
And there are many, many circumstances and situations, indeed, where there could be action taken against American citizens or against American interests that would call for a very prompt and substantial response.
One sore point with Congress, however, seemed on its way to resolution. House Armed Services Chairman Aspin said the administration now appears ready to reverse its recently announced policy of no rotations for the troops in the Gulf.
I think people understand better now what the position is. And I think that if they institute a rotation policy, that will quiet a lot of fears.
The reason for those fears was that troops cannot be kept long in the Saudi desert without a break. Thus, a policy of no rotation seemed to require the administration to use the troops, and soon. Britt Hume, ABC News, the White House.
The Defense Secretary, Dick Cheney, has authorized the call-up of another 72,500 reservists and National Guard members for duty in the Gulf. 36,000 reservists are already there. Today's order, which was expected, doesn't actually send any more troops overseas, but legally it clears the way for the call-up if and when it's needed. In a moment, Peter Jennings will have a report from Baghdad.